Hi, this is Danny Jarabek here with Awards Radar, and I am delighted to be speaking today with Suki Waterhouse. She is, of course, the star of Daisy Jones and the Six as Karen Sirko. Suki, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm very excited to be talking about your character and your role in the show.
Hi Danny, I'm very well. I'm in New York right now, and there's some very strange weather going on. It's like I don't know whether it makes me want to like retract into myself or if it's kind of like main character energy. It's very strange and gloomy. But
Yeah,
other than
yep.
that, very good.
I'm in Philadelphia, not far away, and it is very, very similar
Was
conditions
it the
outside.
same for you?
Very
Okay.
weird. Yep.
Yeah, it's really weird. I'm happy. Yeah, I'm very happy to be happy to be here and talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course, of course. And first of all, I have to say thank you so much because my Spotify between your work and Daisy Jones and the Six is just thriving these days. And so I have so much good things to listen to.
I hope it's connected. I hope somewhere on the algorithm they figured it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, it seems like a logical one. But yeah, so talking about Daisy Jones in the Six in your role as Karen, I'd love to hear from you what your relationship was to the source material, the book that the show was adapted from, and if you were part of the fan base of this, how you got into kind of the early stages of becoming a part of the show.
Well, I think I had quite a similar experience to most, like kind of like the fan base of, I think I was like a Daisy Jones fan before I even could, conceptualize the idea of being in this show. Like that came so much later. But I remember picking up the book, and I'd read it the summer before, and and yeah, it was one of the only books that I've ever read where I really couldn't stop Googling, like where is Daisy now? What is going on with Daisy Jones and the Six? It was just incredibly I was completely taken with it. And I remember loving, I just thought it was very unusual to be able to really feel invested in so many different characters' perspectives. And I really loved the writing of Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved how like you could, especially as the band are kind of like have recollections through the years, and they're older, and they're looking back on their time of the rise and the fall of the band. Yeah, I remember that there were like certain excerpts where it would be like, one character would be like, everything was great, everybody was getting along, and like the other person would be like, that was the fucking worst time, that. And so you just felt incredibly part of the world, which just, yeah, it's a rare and really beautiful thing when you read something like that. And then like kind of, yeah, fast forward a year, I remember I actually was, yeah, I remember I was in LA, and I was auditioning for a lot of things, and I was really like kind of, I was very much in a place where I was like looking for looking for something special to do. And I think I went into my agent's uh in my agent's office, and I saw Daisy Jones and the Six, and I just kind of, it's kind of rare where I'll be like, and I was like, where's my name on this, like where am I on the list? And then she's like, no, you are. And I remember I read for Daisy, and then I read for Karen, and that obviously made a lot more sense, especially as she was British, which was great. That was a very helpful change, that was made from the book into the series. And it was a very long, yeah, it was a very long audition process for all of us. I think we all auditioned for each other, everybody auditioned for someone else, and it was a really unusual audition process too, because there were a couple of auditions, and then I also got to work with Riley. Like Riley would sit in on the sessions, which was really nice actually, to have another actor. A little daunting because I'm such a massive fan of hers, and I'd only like met her a couple of times before. But that was a lovely experience to have, the energy of Daisy in the room. And then one of my final auditions was when they had actually cast Will, and we had a chemistry reading together. and I knew that I kind of like hung on like whether or not we had good chemistry. So I think like we had to kind of burst into the room together, and I remember telling him to I got on his back and made him like run up and down the hallway of Hello Sunshine before we went into this room, and it kind of gave us this like nice like connected moment before we did our scene.
So I know the production of this show, faced pandemic obstacles and the timeline shifted in the process, but that allowed you, the actors, the performers, actually an opportunity to kind of form a band camp that had an extended trial run to really learn and get into the groove of being a band. And so what was that experience like for you, and just developing that chemistry as a group with your other castmates?
I think the obstacles made it, I think, somewhat more than a job. I think it became like this has been all our lives for as long as we can remember them now. It's funny, like when we look back at the cast photos of when we got cast to kind of like where we are now, it's like we look like a bunch of little puppies. Like we don't, it's like almost kind of unrecognizable that, before the pandemic, you've got a job, but also excited about it. We're all going for dinner. We're expecting to shoot in a couple of months, and there was also that like anticipation of like, obviously everyone basically lied to their to the Hello Sunshine and was like, I can definitely play, or like I can make this happen in 2 months, and everyone's like, we had 3 hours a day. I mean, I remember they were very, very that it was I remember when I got the job, I was elated and happy, but it was also like I'd made this huge, commitment that for the 4 months running up to it, I wasn't going to do a single thing but go into Sound City every day and we would rehearse as a band, and that's very unusual for any production now to have that much rehearsal time, and also just for the whole group to have these skills that we just didn't have at that point. So yeah, I think it made it more than a job, and I think by the end, when we did our final performance together, I think we were all like incredibly emotional, and it felt like this, it felt like kind of unbelievable that. Remember when we did like our final performance all up there on stage, like it was incredibly emotional. I remember feeling very, very emotional, and you're like hugging your bandmates, and you're just kind of devastated that it's the end of this like really joyful 3 years that you've spent together, and this kind of this dynamic that you of course like build when you play music together.
Yeah, and so one of my favorite Karen moments actually comes very early on. I think it's in the first episode. She's talking about Rod, and she says, Rod told me to wear low cut shirts, and I told Rod to eat shit, and that was that.
That
And
was always my favorite line too, actually. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite lines in the whole show, and favorite Karen moments too, and it really sets the stage and tone for who Karen is in what she recognizes is a very male dominated industry. How did you kind of build the character and build the reactions and reception that Karen was having to this industry and to her identity as a female performer?
Yeah, I think like the fact that she was British, I kind of resonated with, firstly, because I kind of imagined like maybe Karen had gone to the States to do something to do with music or one of her bands, and she kind of thought maybe it would be like she'd be there for a couple of weeks. Like that's how I imagined it, and then I kind of had this feeling like she's kind of like oh my God, and then suddenly I've been here for like 10 years, 20 years, like she has that kind of she's slightly like she's different from everybody in that way, but I think in terms of like how and definitely in terms of like costume and those kinds of you know, that kind of like attitude, I think Karen was also always facing. You know, she's facing being a woman in the music industry in this very like male dominated space, and like how she just like creates authority in that space. And I think that was something that I was like cognizant of doing. Like I wanted to create an authority for Karen in that space, and that kind of that meant like holding myself in a certain way. And I kind of imagined her to be, because you know, she's not like prudish at all. She's quite like she's kind of like, you know, she's like she enjoys herself, and like everything that kind of like time had to offer in terms of like, you know, she's quite a free person, but she has to like kind of she also has to stay incredibly steely. And I think a lot of the work with Karen was very internal sometimes. And you know, I imagined her as like feeling like she was sort of like the puppeteer of the whole band, because she's probably like kind of the most outwardly stable, I would say, of all of them. And I think she had I think her motive and my motive when I was playing it was always so clear, and the objective was always to be actually just stay together, which is such an incredibly difficult thing to do in music and being a band. And it's literally like having like this long marriage with, you know, a bunch of people, and how they go through life together. I think her objective was always just to stay in the band. And I think it's her and Warren at the end are the only ones that are still on that bus. So I think we were, you know, me and Warren were the most about the music. And I think like whatever drama there was, I think we would have always stayed.
So the show has such a strong 70s sensibility and world building. Was that something that you were excited to dive into? Was there anything that you were watching or listening to really just immerse yourself in that landscape, in that world?
Yeah, I think like, I mean, I remember making a timeline of like every sort of artist that was around in the 70s, and like, you know, kind of like looking exactly at the timeline of like where our music would have fit. And I think Blake did such an amazing job at that. Like I kind of like didn't really realize until I started putting that, you know, timeline together, that like Elton John first came out in the 70s. And I think we also had Blake and Sound City for this kind of like for all of our musical references. And I think it was like I think Blake created a sound that it felt like it came from the 70s, but it also felt like something that hadn't been quite done before. And that was like so central to the role and to the whole show. The fact that because it was, you know, it wasn't like this album was already made when we signed on. It was like they set up Sound City for us, which is like you know, it's like a incredibly famous recording studio. It's where Fleetwood Mac met and recorded music together. So we had this studio that was drenched in history that we rehearsed at, and then we shot in there as well. And Riley and Sam and all of us would be also making the album at the same time. So it was just like this. It was just like a crazy place. Like we smoked so many cigarettes in that parking lot for like 3 years. But like the fact that we kind of were also making this album, and there were like, you know, it was intense. Like there were bumps along the road, and songs changed, and I can't tell you how many times like we'd be in there, and we would have spent like maybe a week or 2 weeks trying to learn a piece of music. And then, you know, as like production changes or things change, it's like this song's cut, we're going to do a different one, or someone's written a different song and it's going to be added. So it would just be like there would be like kind of constant upheaval. I'm just remembering the time that I learned an entire Beethoven song, which they then decided that they weren't going to do that scene. And I was like, this is Beethoven.
So of course you're a musician as well. Is there anything that you've taken from Karen Sirko into your own music, your own inspirations and performance?
Yeah, I mean, when I signed on to do Daisy Jones, I'd been releasing music for like the last 6 or 7 years, but I didn't have a record, and it certainly like wasn't at the place where it is now. And when we stopped during the pandemic, I'd had this like I mean, I've been releasing music for a long time, but I had wanted to make my album for years, and it had kind of been something that I'd been working on for years, but I didn't have like the internal confidence to do it yet. And as like Karen was kind of seeping into me, like, and I was exploring her, I think like I do kind of think that it was something about playing her that like made me go and make the record. And by the time we finished the show, like the week of we finished the show, like I've been signed with Sub Pop, the record was coming out, and now since then I've done like about like 85 shows, been on 3 tours, like you know, in the space of a year. So I think like I think I have a lot to be grateful for to Karen, because she has like that fearlessness and that kind of like, you know, that kind of attitude. And I think that was definitely a gift that I took away from playing her.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Suki. I really appreciated getting to
Thank you,
hear a little
Danny.
bit about this character. I love your performance. I love the music in this show, your own music. And so congratulations on everything you're doing. And thank you so much again.
Thank you, Danny. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
You as well. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. You too.